couple things I want to talk about. I'm going to revisit a point that I made a couple weeks ago about teams to stay away from. K-State. K-State is number one and number two on my list of teams to stay away from. And last week was a good example. Oklahoma's a 27.5-point favorite. K-State had no business even being on the field with them, and they somehow found a way to win. But you go back to the previous week, K-State is a 10.5-point favorite, and they somehow lose to Arkansas State. Now you look at them again this week, they're a 3.5-point favorite. What do? You just leave them alone, because they'll probably lose the game today when the whole world thinks that they just beat Oklahoma. This is probably a team I should watch, when really it was just K-State doing K-State things. The other team that I talk about is TCU. TCU's a 3.5-point dog last week, and what do? They show up late just to cover the spread, and they're just as capable of winning 60-0. But two very dangerous teams, and you can win betting them, but just very, very disturbing to watch teams like that just show up when they're not supposed to. They don't show up when they're not supposed to, and they finish the season, 7-5, and it's just very confusing. Again, I will always advise to stay away from K-State, TCU, and we just learned some lessons about them. Another lesson I learned last week, that it really plays into the strategy of even betting. I loved the Army game last week. I mean, I loved it. I spent hours breaking down the tape. I was looking at coordinator, and I was looking at head coach history for the Cincinnati coach, and I went all the way back to 2014, a game that he was a D coordinator for Ohio State going against Navy, and how he struggled with that particular type of offense. I mean, I loved Army last week. I was ready to it was the kind of bet that I was talking to the wife about, and then she reminded me of what the strategy is and what you do week to week, and even betting and everything else. And I felt like Jimmy DeGreek. This is Appalachian State going to beat Michigan outright, and then last minute before the game, I decided I would much rather be pissed off that I didn't bet more on it than be completely stressed out because I just lost a game on a 14-point underdog. So and it was a push too. So I would have sat there with this large wager the entire game to finish at a push, which that's about the worst that you can ask for, even though you get your money back. That game ended up being a push, and it just reminded me to stick to the rules. And there's some bets this week that I saw some messages. I think the Detroit and New Orleans game, I really like Detroit in that game. And I think somebody posted that they were going to go heavy on the game. Everybody's got to choose their own strategy. The one you like the most is the one that usually breaks your heart, and it's the hardest to recover from. So I would advise everybody to stay with the even betting. Week 4 and week 5 is a real turning point. The first time we went on, I talked about the week 6 risk. By week 6, we know everything, and by week 6, if we're following the strategy, we're getting ready to take the entire bankroll and spread that out evenly amongst the profile for week 6. This week 4 and 5 in the NFL, it's you can see it in the schedule. There's some real turning points for some of these teams. The Bears and Colts. What are they going to be? And I think we'll find out about with that game. The Browns and the Cowboys. We look at the kind of games they're coming off of and where they're going. Arizona coming off of a loss. You got 2-1 teams that are either going to go 3-1, which looks pretty good, or you got 2-1 teams that are going to go 2-2, and then they become coin flip teams as far as sports investors go with point spreads. But the Detroit New Orleans game, I'm going to talk about a little bit, and why I like Detroit, and what could be risky on both ends. New Orleans to me looks like a broken team, but the scary part is they've played some really good teams this year. They beat Tampa. It was week 1, so Tampa really wasn't Tampa yet. I still don't even think Tampa is what they're going to be. Their defense is ridiculous, and their offense hasn't even gotten started. So New Orleans beat them. Then they go to Vegas and they get outplayed the entire game, and Vegas just wipes the floor with them. But then New Orleans last week they go up against, and they go up against Green Bay in a shootout. And at this point, I think Green Bay is the best team in the NFC. It'll change in a couple weeks, but as of right now, I think Green Bay is the best team in the NFC. They got a run game and they're putting up points, and Rodgers is just, it looks like he's playing Madden with the rest of the league right now. So New Orleans is coming off of some really tough matchups. Detroit hasn't had the same tough matchups, but what I really like about Detroit on any other team, one of the running backs is phenomenal at in the pass game, catching the ball out of the backfield. But Detroit is owning the time of possession. That's a really important thing when you go up against past teams like Drew Brees and New Orleans. And I think that they're going to control the time of possession. But and their defense is looking pretty good. But I really like Detroit's wide receiving core. They don't have a true defined star. When you look at some teams, you know who the star wide receiver is. You look at New Orleans, Michael Thomas is their star wide receiver. He's not playing, but that doesn't really play that big of a role in why I like Detroit on this one. But you know who the star is. Detroit right now is spreading the ball. They got about 4 receivers that are right around 100, 150 yards for the season. They got one that's a little bit better than that, but for the most part, they're spreading the ball out. Stafford, I think, looks great. And here's a crazy statistic. Matt Stafford is top 10 all time in fourth quarter comebacks. I would have never guessed that, but I started digging in and I looked at it, and he is. And in the last 5 years, I think he's like top 3. So at 4.5 points, if that game is close and Detroit they own the time of possession, like I think. If it's close in the fourth quarter, I don't know, 4.5 points, that's more than a field goal. I just don't see this game being more than that. So I really like Detroit in the game, and I think that this could be a turning point in their season. That division could shape out to be very tough. The Bears they're not playing very bad. They're always good on defense. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Nick Foles. I just said what I think about Green Bay, but if Detroit beats New Orleans, now we got a pretty interesting division there. And Detroit can be a real disruptor this season. They won against one of the best offenses in football last week in a late fourth quarter comeback, and I don't think New Orleans has that kind of offense. So that's my justification for that bet. But I wouldn't put anything more on that game than any other game. I would keep it even. And if you feel the need to press them all. The other deep dive I took this week, some people sent me direct messages talking about the Vanderbilt pick, and I'm gonna tell you why. I don't love Vanderbilt. I don't think that they have a great team even, but I took a real deep dive into LSU, and we all know LSU won the national championship last year, and majority of that roster is playing on Sundays now, including their quarterback, and most of their offense, star wide receiver, star running back, they're all playing in the NFL. But the piece that has me really looking at LSU is their D coordinator, Aranda, I believe is now head coach for Baylor. Joe Brady, I think, was the biggest piece to that. Not Joe Burrow, Joe Brady. Joe Brady he was their special passing consultant role and wide receivers coach. Coach Orgeron went to New Orleans and asked for special permission to interview him, and then brought him on specifically to work with Joe Burrow for 2 seasons. Brady moved on. He's in the NFL. I think that's the biggest miss. But I went all the way back, and I went back to Orgeron at USC. He took over USC and went 9-4. Well, when he did that, he took over a roster that was recruited by Pete Carroll and Lane Kiffin, both amazing recruiters. And he goes on to be the D coordinator at LSU, and then he takes over in 16 at LSU. Well, the 2016 class of LSU was not his recruiting class. Les Miles recruited it. That was the number 2 recruiting class in the country. That's the class that just won the national championship. Um, Most of them were seniors then, or redshirt seniors, so on their fifth year, and those players are now in the NFL. We go to 2017, Ed Orgeron's first recruiting class as head coach. That's the number 7 recruiting class in the nation. Not too bad, but they took a step back. Now you go to 2018, and the reason I think this is important is 17 and 18. Those are your starters right now. 2018, they have the number 15 recruiting class in the country, and that's the LSU team that's playing right now. No Aranda, no Joe Burrow, no Joe Brady, and the starters come from the number 15 recruiting class, and I believe there was only one 5-star. And I'm not saying I don't believe in Ed Orgeron. I think he's a good coach, but I think that he caught lightning in a bottle last year with somebody else's recruiting class that was number 2 in the country in 2016. The reason I bring all this up is LSU this year, right now, and it might even go on for another week or two. I think we got a very small window of LSU getting these very large point spreads. LSU will probably win the game, but when you break it all down, it's going to take the fans, it's going to take the wagers time to catch up to the fact that LSU is not putting points on the board every week. They're 21 and a half, depending where you look. If possibly score first, you might be the coaching off training camp. So I bring that up not because I'm trashing LSU. I'm bringing it up, all of the things that I just mentioned, because I think that LSU is getting large point spreads purely on a hangover of winning a national championship in dominant fashion last year. This recruiting class that are freshmen right now, they're coming from a number 3 recruiting class or a number 2 recruiting class. And the 2020 class, I believe, is number 2 in the country. So it's all a hangover from the national championship. And number 2 class some of these guys will start, but typically only the 5. We have a very they went out last week. Mississippi, maybe they do cover. I mean, the sports investing gods work in weird ways like that, but that's what I broke down. I thought it was really interesting because I wanted to know more about what they lost, and I also wanted to know more about what they have. And it just seems like a good opportunity to jump on some underdogs against a team that's probably overstated. Um, I don't know that there was a ton more I was going to talk about. I just this week and next week major turning points. Coming off of a 7-1-1 week last week, and the week before was 6-3. This is a time to be really cautious. That's why I stayed at 9 games rather than narrowing it down to 6 or 7. I want to keep that impact of a loss lower. I threw the Cowboys-Browns game on there as an extra pick. I think the Browns got a good shot in that game. I think Dallas put up a lot of points against a very bad Seattle defense last week. So looking at that Browns-Cowboys game, the Browns have the best running back core in the NFL. I mean, that those 2 running backs are both Pro Bowlers in my opinion. So I like that game, but I don't really trust the Browns coaching staff. But I still like that game and the points. But those are my thoughts for the week. I'm not gonna be able to record for the next 2 weeks. I'm gonna be out of town working on Saturdays, and so I'm probably gonna take it a little bit easier. The picks for the next 2 weeks, proceed with caution and keep it at even betting, coming off of the weeks we've been coming off of with 9 this week. I'm going to be happy with 5-4. If we go 6-3, great. But 5-4 is really the goal this week. The only team I really trust in the SEC at this point is Florida. I don't trust Bama. I don't trust LSU. I certainly do not trust Georgia. I trust Florida very much. I think that they're going to win the SEC. Today's point spread, I think, just went up to 18. I don't know that I like it at 18, but I loved it at 16.5 and 17. And I still stay away from the Sunday night, Monday night games. And I don't know, maybe that's a week. Is there anything else you guys can think of? Come on, Muhammad. I know you got something on your mind.
I was just taking. You still don't trust Bama to cover?
I don't trust Bama this week because they're going against A&M, who's recruited well, and I like that coach. And I think that last week's A&M game was a little bit trappy to me, knowing that they're going against Bama. So I don't feel great about Bama's quarterback. Last week was a gimme game, but they let off the gas and let Mizzou back in it. And Bama didn't cover the spread for the game. They had a monster first half, but they allowed the backdoor cover. And I don't think it's going to be that kind of game. But, I trust Bama's D, but I don't know enough about the offense, especially, Sark calls the game really weird. So I need to see Bama for a couple more games before they deserve my money.
Well, the other part I was going to tell you was Cam is out for the Sunday game, so I don't know if the odds have changed, but I would load up heavy on it.
Who's out for Sunday?
Cam Newton.
That game feels like a trap also, though. You got New England. I think the spread is 7. If Cam's out, I think Cam's probably worth a point and a half. It may go up to 8.5. But New England is very defensive minded, and Belichick. It's the same game. It's the same team every year. It's a bunch of guys whose names you don't really know other than Brady and maybe the running back that lit it up last week. And they show up with just a plan on defense. We all watched the Chiefs game last week, and I think Mahomes has patterns. He's very hard to beat, but Mahomes inside the 30, he likes to roll out and he likes to run the ball. And I think Bill Belichick is smart enough to see that. And where Baltimore got beat is they were constantly blitzing him, and Mahomes is too fast for that, and I don't think Belichick's going to do that. They have great defensive backs, so I think that they're probably going to play a lot of zone D. But 7 points, I just don't like the game because I can see the Chiefs doing what they did against Baltimore, but I could also see Belichick coming out and beating them, and this being the lesson that the Chiefs learn that motivates them for the rest of the year. So I don't know, and then the Chiefs. I think they play the Raiders on Thursday night after this week. I'm not sure, but I know they got a Thursday night coming up. But
Chicago, I think.
Oh yeah, I think you're right. But Belichick is just too smart. And I would never bet or advise playing against Belichick as a 7-point dog. Even 7 points with this Patriots team, I don't even know that I would lay it. It's we just don't. We don't. It's what?
Third time in history since he's been coaching the team that he's a 7-point dog.
Belichick against Andy Reid. I like him just the same at this point because Andy Reid's got all the toys. But that just seems like a risky game. It could be a 6-point game where the Chiefs win it. You just don't know. I think they're going to play chess with each other early. But Newton in certainly changes it.
Absolutely.
What else we got? Uh, 18 minutes. This might be our shortest recording yet, but I'll tell everybody, and I'm not going to be really putting up too too many in-game picks or things to look at. So, fingers crossed that look for the in games. I'll throw some tips out there at some things to look at. Look at first quarter team over under. I found for 3 weeks in a row, Army at 0.5 over or under in the first quarter, and 2 weeks in a row they scored on the opening drive to pay. I mean, that's just a great start to any game, is when you get paid right off the bat. First half over unders. Coastal Carolina was one that I put up at 14.5. I like it at 14.5, but if the other team receives first, it's going to drop to 13, and I like it. Coastal Carolina, believe it or not, is a top 5 first half scoring team in the entire country right now. And it's crazy that we're looking at Coastal Carolina, but I really don't care. I'll bet on your local high school if I find a pattern that's going to continuously pay my wife's car payment. So if that's it, I'll say with 40 minutes to the opening bell, let's do this. Let's stay positive, test negative, and cash some tickets, fellas.